Hello everyone. I have noticed the most recent builds, videos, as well as all the comments from the developers regarding Elden Ring. I refuse to get involved in that trauma. Therefore, I'm going to focus on these build videos. Okay, let's see. Okay, before I can get into what I disagree with on the build videos, let me first be very clear about something. I am not bashing anyone. I understand that a lot of work goes into editing a video, putting in clips and things like that. These are things that I'm unable to do because of a lack of money and other factors. My channel's not going to be half as fancy as the other channels. However, that does not give those channels with a check mark and editing software a pass to do certain things that should be frowned upon. But that said, I do recognize the work they put in. I'm not bashing that. I just don't like the way that they are wording things or presenting the build. Those are my issues with those particular channels. Okay. With that out of the way, let me start with the basics before we get into all the build stuff. As mentioned in my prior recording, there are different damage types in the game. There is also other factors to be aware of. So the more that you have a hard on for something like a sword build, the more difficult that you're going to make it for you. That is Elden Ring in a nutshell. It's as difficult as you make it. Like other games, there's ways to be far more efficient and make things easier on yourself. I would say take advantage of that. Don't be stuck in your ways. This is not Dark Souls, this is Elden Ring. That said, let's talk about damage types. Again, as you can see on my screen, there are different damage types, and they each have their own negatives or positives. And in the case of standard, that's an exception, but for the most part, they have their bonuses and negatives. Standard damage is what you will find on swords. It won't do any extra damage, nor does it have any negatives. You may think this is a great thing, but in reality, it isn't. Piercing damage, at least for melee, is going to be your best bet because it has bonus damage versus light and medium armored enemies as well as scaly creatures. This is what I meant by you're making it as difficult as you want it to be. The more you neglect to take advantage of the mechanics like this, the more difficult it is for you. That said, that's why I'm recommending pierce damage as a melee damage type. Another good alternative is strike damage. I've mentioned this in my prior recording, but there is a strike weapon called the Morning Star. It does cause bleed buildup. It has kick as its Ash of War, and it does pretty good damage all around. So, Partisan or Morning Star, they're the two weapons that would be good examples for damage types to aim for. If you are going to pair this with another damage type, make sure it's paired with the correct one. So in this case, it's lightning damage. It's best to pair lightning damage with the Morningstar or Partisan due to the fact that they're already doing damage against armored enemies. That's kind of how you have to think about being efficient, is the bonus types and what damage types to be paired with. That said, moving on. Let's talk about magic versus faith now. For the most part, magic spells have access, well, to magic. There are a few fire, ice, and I think there's one poison spell. I'll double check that, but I know for sure there's fire and ice spells in the magic spell list. If you look at faith, it's going to be mostly lightning. Then there's also going to be, in the mix, fire and one armament's blood buildup, which is super strong, by the way. Blood buildup in this game is super strong. It's not a damage type listed here, but I can tell you it's super strong. I actually think blood buildup is probably like chaos damage or something like that. There's no resistance to it, but I could be wrong. Either way, it's super strong. So you get access to lightning, fire. There is certainly ice in there, blood buildup, and I think one poison spell, just like magic. I can double check that at a later date if need be, but bottom line, that's the damage types that you're dealing with in between the two spell categories. Out of the two spell categories, Faith is clearly the winner here because of the damage types it has available to it. Because most of it is lightning, it's going to be better than magic damage. You can see right here that magic damage's weakness is enemies are resistant to magic damage, obviously. I'm sure lightning damage has a similar downside to it. However, if you look at the positives, you get a much wider range of bonus damage because lightning is telling you that it's doing damage against armored serpentine creatures, whereas magic is only doing bonus damage against armored enemies. Therefore, you get a much wider range of bonus damage through lightning than you do magic, and therefore, I would say Faith is better than magic by far. Not just in the spells, but also in the ornaments. You get some of the best ornaments in the game, like the Blood Buildup one. Okay, so now that I've laid out the damage types of Faith and Magic, I will go ahead and talk about bows now. Bows are certainly viable in Elden Ring. As a matter of fact, they're more viable in Elden Ring than they are in Dark Souls. You could definitely do a bow build if you wanted to, assuming that you can aim well and, assuming that you were aware of these different damage types, because while piercing damage is good, it's sometimes good to mix piercing with other damage types just to ensure you're punching through as much damage as possible. But yes, if you're certainly aware of the damage types and you can aim, I would say bow builds certainly will work out for you. As far as consistent damage is concerned, I would say bows have a much greater advantage than when compared to Faith. Faith is limited to how much FP you have and cerulean tears, whereas bows, once you get to mid to late game, you would have enough runes to buy the ammunition you need and consistently put out arrows as needed. So in a way, bows are much better than Faith because of the fact that they're more sustained. However, either or is a perfectly fine ranged option. Okay, with all the damage types out of the way, I need to tab over. Just give me a second. Yes, I need that, but I also need this and where's spears? It's thrusting swords. Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry about that. I forgot to pull up the tabs specific to that. So let's talk about best melee weapons. Because while you can do spell or ranged builds in general, some people may not want to do that because they're not good at aim. That's perfectly fine. Let's talk about melee builds. I think that the best weapons for melee, at least based on the data that's available, not all of Elden Ring has been explored. So all I can do is base this following section on what is best out of the available data, and that's going to be the Morningstar, as I mentioned. The Morningstar is strike damage, it has kick, and blood buildup as its passive. This is the best strike damage weapon base that I can find thus far in the game and, of course, through the data. It does so much more damage than you think it does. Don't even look at the base damage for Morningstar because the blood buildup is what really does the damage here. That's the heavy lifter here. Kick is great because it throws off the guard or balance, and when you're dealing with heavily armored enemies, which is what you want strike damage for, there's a good chance that you'll find some with shields. So kick is really great against those people, or those enemies, I should say. So Morningstar is a very good anti-armor, anti-rock weapon. Let me tab over for the Partisan. Partisan, where are you? Oh, you're down there. I'd have to double check that because I don't think that that number is right for Spear, but if the Spear does more damage than the Partisan, I would say go with the Spear. Either way, though, the Partisan is much earlier on than some of the other weapons, including the Morningstar. I would say to get you started in Elden Ring and start to gain familiarity with how spear weapons work, Definitely grab a Partisan. You can get it as early as just outside the starting zone, whereas the Morning Star you have to travel a little bit for it. And I think the other stuff it has to be either purchased or looted. I would have to double check that, but either way, I know Partisan's very early. But yes, I would start with a Partisan and do that. That is what I would consider the best melee weapons. Let's talk about upgrades real quickly. There's a reason that I'm selecting plain weapons and not remembrance or unique weapons. If you look at how the game works, plain weapons can be upgraded 25 times. Remembrance or unique weapons can only be upgraded 10 times. There are certain cases where unique or remembrance weapons are good, but I'm talking about an overall build here. Just something that I can throw out to the world and say, hey, this will do just fine. If I was doing a very specific build, I would consider something like that, but because I'm doing a general build, I am not going to consider that. Remembrance weapons are very specific to a build and would require a completely different set of stats. With that out of the way, I need to talk about ashes now. Okay. Let's see, isn't this? Yes. Earlier, I was mentioning the damage types and how it would be best to pair piercing with lightning damage. You can do that through the Ash of War. And here's the other kicker. The Lightning Ash of War changes the scaling to dexterity. It favors dexterity over any other stat. So, thankfully, spears and bows in general, or really anything of that nature, tend to thrive on dexterity. It's entirely possible to do a Faith hybrid build or a melee build that uses a bow as well. You can go either way, and the build would still function. Either way, though, I would recommend doing a Lightning Ash of War with the spear. That would be the best way to handle things, I think. Okay, one other thing I need to cover in terms of Ash of War is the Faith and the other one. Let's see, where is it? It's Vow of the Indomitable. Yep. Okay, so there's that. Where's the other one? It's Barricade. Yeah. Okay. Okay. As mentioned in my prior recording, I did acknowledge that there would be two Ashes of War that might be good for no hit runs, although they could potentially work for other builds, and that's going to be Vow of the Indomitable and Barricade Shield. The difference between the two is very simple. Barricade Shield reduces the stamina cost of blocking, whereas Vow of the Indomitable makes you invulnerable for, I think it's 2 seconds. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Vow of the Indomitable is 2 seconds of invulnerability. 2 seconds of invulnerability is plenty of time to do certain things, like either get out of the way or strike a few times before putting up your shield again. There are plenty of ways to handle either Ash. Neither one's a wrong answer. That's really all I can say about those ashes. But the reason I want to bring them up is because what I think is the best melee weapons in the game happen to be one-handers. Therefore, it's going to work with shields. Let's talk about shields now. Let's see here. Oops, gotta scroll up first. Okay. Guard boost, yep. Here, the wiki says it, but I'll go ahead and give you a crash course. Guard boost, basically that number is very important because the higher it is, the less stamina it takes to block an attack. Barricade Shield can certainly reduce it by a huge margin. However, having higher guard boost still helps even if you have Barricade Shield, because that lowers the cost of blocking even further. There's only a handful of shields that I have noticed having a very high number in that, and I'll scroll back down. Brass Shield is one, with its boost being at 56. And I did notice a runner-up, and that's going to be this one over here. Banished Knight Shield at 52. So either one of these can work. If you don't like the looks of the big brass shield, I get it. It's all about fashion and Dark Souls and Elden Ring. I would say the Banished Knight Shield is also fine. You want these minion shields for a couple of reasons. One, how the Ash of Wars work, and Also, just because I don't see a point in doing great shields. You don't get much of a bonus jumping from a medium shield to a great shield. There's very few great shields that are in the 50s numbers for guard boost. Plus, they have a ton of weight on them. So I would say either this or brass shield is the best that I can see so far. If there's ever new data for any of these things, whether it be the shields or the weapons, then I will certainly update it. But either way, I'm laying out the information so you can understand my reasoning. And so if that new data becomes available, you can apply the same method of reasoning to that. Okay? Let's go ahead and finish with what I think is the best builds. The best builds in the game, in my opinion, are going to be one of two. One is a Faith hybrid build, which is what I'm doing. That's where I'm using melee along with Faith incantations. In my particular case, I'm using it just for heals and armaments. I am not using it for lightning spells. Therefore, I don't need a very high FP because I'm not doing much with my FP other than those listed things. However, you could change the build a little bit to where it's doing those spells along with heals and incantations. If you want to, that's fine. I'll go over that in just a minute as part of the finishing class thing. But build 2 would be a hybrid. If you don't want to do spells and you want to make it real simple on yourself, like if you want the absolute easiest build, it's going to be a spear and bow build. The Faith hybrid build will be running spear 2, but this one will be using bows as well. Or I'm sorry, we'll be using bows in place of spells. So yeah, you have build 1, which is Faith hybrid, and you have build 2, which is spear and bow. Those would be what I would consider the best builds. How you start them is entirely up to you. I would say if you're doing the Faith hybrid, Confessor is going to be the best starting point for that. Prophet would certainly get you more faith, but Confessor has a better start in terms of not just the equipment that you start with, but also in the stats. If you're going to be doing the spear and bow build, there's a couple different ways you could start that. You could do samurai, which would get you a bow at the very start, plus some fire arrows. I would not burn those right away, no pun intended. But later on, you would certainly be able to add to that. So yeah, I would say that there's that. I guess you could also do some of the other ones that have either dex or strength listing. If there is strength or dex listing as the base starting class for that particular build, I would be perfectly fine with saying, oh, you can do that instead of samurai if you want to. Okay. With that out of the way, I did mention something related to the Faith build, and let me go and go over that to completely finish this recording as part of the last section. Okay, so while Prophet can certainly work for a dedicated Faith spell building, it's not conductive towards, or it's not beneficial to you to do it, simply because Confessor has better stats overall in terms of balancing between faith, melee, and all, or dex and strength and all of that. One other thing I do want to kind of point out as well is that starting equipment. The Confessor actually has perhaps the most balanced armor stats in the game, in terms that it has poise, resistances, and all of that, while not weighing too much. But you also get, on top of that, a sword and shield to start with, so you can start getting familiar with shields, because either one of my builds are going to be one-handed, so there's that. You also have access to that assassin incantation early on, so that you can use sneak attacks with Confessor. Certainly a lot easier than Prophet, because Prophet only starts with that flame spell and the heal, whereas Confessor starts with that silent step thing as well as the heal. So in a way, Confessor is going to be better than Prophet in the long run. Early on, it might have a better edge to the Confessor in terms of spell damage, but either way, the Confessor will catch up. And then lastly, kind of related to this, I need to talk about diversification. As with any game, it's good to diversify due to the fact that every game at some point has depreciating values and hard caps. I don't know what the hard cap is for Elden Ring quite yet. I've seen Reddit posts that say not go over 40. I would say that's probably a safe number to assume that that's going to be around the hard cap. Therefore, it would be best to get 20 to 30 in all of your other stats so that you have more, things to work with, whether that be stamina, FP, health, strength, dex, etc. That's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.